in special partnership with and brought to you by our friends at FLYN. Today on Soulfront, where we explore personal, social, and workforce transformation, we have Tom Morin. Tom was nearly killed twice at work, and then a third time trying to escape unfulfilling work. He was shelled in the former Yugoslavia, just missed being chopped in half on a drilling rig, and survived oxygen deprivation high on a mountain in Peru. His last brush with death forced him to critically examine his own working life and compelled him to help others do the same. Tom has transformed his challenging and sometimes dangerous working life into a mission to create a better world of work. Tom is an experienced and accomplished organizational leader, an inspiring speaker. We'll be exploring the key themes of his new book, Your Best Work, Creating a Working Life That's Right for You. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Tom, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us today. Quick introduction of you. Tom, you're an experienced organizational leader, speaker, author. You recently released your new book entitled Your Best Work, Creating the Work Life That's Right for You. Your backstory is in the military and the private sector, and it gives a unique insight into understanding and appreciating work. You described like a number of near-death experiences at work that really changed your life and forced you to critically re-examine like work life. And it's also compelled you to help others to do the same thing. We'll explore a few key themes of your book and dig into creating meaningful work and that big idea. And, you know, honestly, we're just gonna have a great conversation. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Hey, to begin, like I'd like you to give an overview of like what your best work means. Like there's key themes that I took away from the book. You know, one is to be inspired by courage, be enriched with freedom, to authentically to be authentically your own, to be intentional, to contribute to your well-being. Like those are some of the takeaways that I had. But can you expand on what your best work means to you?
Sure. So when I speak about your best work, I never really think about what somebody should be doing as a job. We all know that, especially before the global pandemic, that society often teaches us the value of certain work. And before the pandemic, you know, you never would have saw a delivery truck driver, bus driver, grocery store clerk seen as deeply meaningful and fulfilling jobs. And yet, you know, we're thanking people when they're wiping down the self-checkout at our local grocery store. So your best work to me is somebody who's able to engage in something that they truly enjoy, and we'll talk about how we get to enjoy things, but they're also able to contribute to well-being through that work. So it's in from my perspective and the framework that I approach this through, it's almost not enough to be doing what you love, because a lot of people do what they love and then they get bored and tired of it, or it's not fulfilling. But if we can do what we love, find that thing, and we can contribute to someone else's well-being in a way that's right for them through that work, then we're truly able to do our best work, because it's that contribution to others that is that sustaining motivator.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's such a great idea, and there's in a lot of ways there's many dysfunctional workplace models out there. Like there's organizations that might be profitable, but their culture, it can be rooted in fear, limited by short-sightedness, like these uncertain environments where employees feel empty and unfulfilled. Is this the type of like work environment that your best work philosophy is trying to push back against?
Yeah, so when we look at our world of work, it's a broad statement. It really means engaging in an opportunity to perform a job or one or more jobs throughout our lifetime. And we call that lifetime of work or career. And there's certain constructs out there in the world that enable us to participate in this world of work. One of them is organizational employment. So doing a job within this small or large group of people that someone in that group, we'll call it our leader, sets our maybe it's a co-creation. Often we're in service of someone else's goals. They set our goals, that we work within the systems they provide, and there's a certain culture, ideology that we're rewarded for perpetuating or at least supporting, whether we're genuine in our support or just quite superficial in order to get through the day. Um, and when I talk about that, people say, "Oh my God, organizations, they're a terrible thing." Absolutely not. We need to step back from these things that are provided to us in society, all these buckets that we're able to jump in and work. And we need to just acknowledge that they exist. And while we're in there, is there a way that we can participate in it in a way that's right for us? So I'll just mention one thing real quickly. Great friend of mine, she said, "Tom, I don't understand why you talk so much about work and why you wrote this book about work. And, I hate my job," she said, "but it doesn't bother her." And I said, "That's fantastic." I said, "Obviously, you've got other, deep sources of meaning in your life, like so many people do. And you don't need that level of meaning from work. But if we're one of those people that is not satisfied with our job and it's causing us a lot of distress, then we need to acknowledge that we need meaning from the work, and the bucket that we're working in we need to either get better with working in that organization or find a different way to work, because there's only so many opportunities out there, and other people have different opportunities. Some people have more opportunities, but there's only so many ways to engage in work. And we really, like I say, if we're not enjoying it, we have to find another way or a better way to engage with work. And sometimes it's in organizations. So if we can improve our experience of organizational employment, and if organizations can attempt to improve other people's experience of employment in their organization, we can go a long way to contributing to the well-being of humans.
Yeah, yeah. Like on an individual level,
Mhm.
when is it that this idea of understanding your best work really kicks in? Like what is it that
Mhm.
moves somebody towards going on that journey, would you say?
And I don't know what it's like for everyone, but I've been uh, deep into this topic now for the past 12 years. And it started with my own personal crisis. And then as I understood that, you know, became more educated in that and started helping other people with the same thing. My experience shows me that really we either end up doing our best work in two ways. We somehow, and I mean this in a wonderful way, stumble into it. We just go along a path in life and we've got this amazingly satisfying, meaningful job, and that's fantastic. Um, but a lot of people they need a crisis to push them either, into their best work or almost away from work. I mean, there needs to be something that drives us. If you're not one of these fortunate, good people that just, you were just had that path available to you, I find it we normally get that, but get there through crisis.
Yeah, like I mean, you cite like three brushes of death that forced you to
Hmm.
re-examine your own working life. Being bombed in former Yugoslavia, like a near fatal miss on a drilling rig, oxygen deprivation high on a mountain in Peru. Uh, can you speak to these experiences? And when did you fully recognize the importance of critically re-examining your own working life?
Yeah, and I love the way you put all three together, because every time I do that or I hear somebody say that, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I'm a slow learner. I mean, you would have thought the first brush with death, you would have had some sort of epiphany and figured out the way to move forward in this fragile, finite life, but I didn't. What happened was I was brought up in a military family, and the path that was a path of least resistance for me was joining the military. And it was a wonderful career. I spent 11 years in the military. But when we were in the former Yugoslavia and after the mortar attack, um, I didn't have these life flash before my eyes. And sure I thought of loved ones, and that day I have to remind people that nobody was killed or injured that day. We lost 4 people on that tour, but that day everything was safe and it was over very quickly on that day. But what I felt standing in the middle of our compound after we got the all clear and everybody's kind of shaking it off, coming out of the bomb shelters and from wherever they were taking shelter, the first thought I had was the nature of the job. I thought, this is a job to me. It's a job that's going to get me killed. potentially, I need to get a different job. And so that's the mindset I had. And I didn't realize, I didn't think too much about that. So I thought job, job, job. So about a year later, after the deployment was over and I got back to Canada, and I said, I'm done with the military for now. I put in what's called a release, and I was living in Western Canada, and the job that was the path that was available to me, and I didn't have any post-secondary education. I didn't want to go back to school. So the job that was available to me was working on a drilling rig. And again, deeply meaningful job. The military's wonderful opportunity to contribute to other people's well-being, tons of adventure, and just wonderful people. And, flying from a major city 2 hours up to the tree line up north and 40 below, and working with a group of people who are dedicated to their task, and heavy manual labor, just like you see on TV, salt of the earth, fabric of the land, deeply meaningful. And so I was immersed in that again until I had a near miss accident. So without getting into details, I was standing in the middle of this drilling rig floor. Somebody yelled something and I jumped out of the way. Had I not jumped out of the way, there's a large piece of equipment that literally would have sheared me in half at the waist. Horrible. I just would have been chopped in half. So, but then again, life didn't flash before my eyes. I didn't have this big moment of clarity. I thought, another job that's going to get me killed, I have to get a different job. And this time went back to school. So I quit the military. Quit the drilling rig, worked for a year to save a little money, went to 2 years of college, and I thought what is a nice, safe corporate job in a big high rise. I was working with smart women and men who were, dedicated to the complex technical work that we were doing. I was managing large industrial computing systems. And so I worked up through these organizations. Obviously it was a well-paying job, but before long, the job wasn't giving me what I needed. And it wasn't adrenaline that I needed. It wasn't adventure. There was just something missing. So living in Western Canada, I took up mountaineering. My wife and I started climbing rock and ice. And before you know it, much bigger mountains all over the world, and found ourselves in Peru. And a day in Peru, we were at 18,000 feet. I started to get a little hallucinations and micro sleeps in my brain, and thought I was going to stop breathing, and almost collapsed. Lack of oxygen. So that was a problem, though. It was a bigger problem than the other two instances, because here I was having this already knowing that work itself wasn't ever going to be able to give me some sort of meaning. And now my escape from work, this huge global adventure in mountaineering, wasn't doing it either. So I really hit the low point in my life, and I really felt low. That was 12 years ago. And for some reason, instead of getting depressed, wallowing in it, finding another hobby, I just started reading. I started to try to understand that intersection between this life that we have and how it's going to end one day, and this life of occupation and work. And took a little while, but I finally found a paradigm or a worldview that really made the whole thing make sense to me. Got educated on that, trained, started helping other people, and it's evolved into what it is today.
Yeah, well, you talk about in your book, that we're meaning taking machines,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're socialized to like how to value work.
Right.
From an early age, we're taught, what meaningful work is, and we haven't really been able to define that meaningful work for ourselves. And it's kind of talking about your own journey that you just
Mm-hmm.
explained. It's, and you also talk about how it's important to reset our own values, like how important it is to question our whys.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this one question that you asked that I really love, and that's, if you had the ability to choose your dream job
Mm-hmm.
without worrying about salary or your family or your peers, like their approval, like what would it be?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would it be? And it got me thinking. And is this the type of reflection that speaks to finding your authentic work? Like, what is
Yeah.
authentic?
Yeah. So our authentic work, and that's the question that we that helps us find our authentic work. But that's a terrifying question, because what it really means is shake off no, I don't mean shake off in a bad way, but we scrape away all that security we have. So for example, depending on where you live in the world or how you've been brought up, you are rewarded for, thinking a certain way, believing a certain way, valuing certain things. And, we're not born, as infants with all those values in us. They're taught to us. And a lot of them are wonderful things. But when we ask people, you know, if nobody cared, if nobody cared, what would you do? And it's a terrible thing to think, well, but what do you mean nobody cares? Okay, but let's hypothetically, nobody cares. Nobody's ever going to know. What would you do? Well, there's something I want to do, but I need people to care. I mean, I need people to care in my lives. So, but when I ask that question, a lot of people always have something that intuitively comes to their head, but it's almost like there's this thing I can never speak. If you're one of those people, a lot of people say, no, I know exactly what I want to do. And it's a great, fantastic. But for those people that are truly not, truly struggling with meaning in their working lives, often the thing they want to do is the thing that's most terrifying for them, because we know that, it's called the burden of freedom. All the choices in our lives that we are free to make, we are absolutely responsible for those. So, if I choose to pursue a different path, or, write a book, make a movie, put all my investment in my life and open an ice cream shop, yeah, I can blame people if it didn't work out, but really I'm responsible for making that decision. So that burden of freedom, that terror of that unspoken thing that you really would want to do,
Mhm.
um, these are scary questions. But your authentic work, and this is, I say this, the path I've taken for so many of my clients, and even on the individual and organizational level, that authentic work really is what you care. It's there's a German philosopher who once said, care in the face of meaninglessness is authenticity. And what he meant to say was, if all things in the world, we can't know what their value is, but you still care about one thing, you value one thing, knowing that it's all the same, that thing you care about is what you were really meant to do. That's the thing that's really you. That's your authentic self. And we use that word authentic a lot in our society. But if we think about, it's what I care about, knowing that everything out there is the same. So the job that you truly care about, knowing that all jobs are equally valued, like we've seen before COVID, like grocery store clerk and accountant, or bus driver and nurse. All those jobs are valued. They're kind of all the same. But if you care about one, in the face of all that equality, equanimity, that is your authentic self speaking.
Yeah. Like for people trying to go down that path to find their authentic work, there's three strategies that you discuss. And the first one, I like the names of these, they're fun. The first one is double down, and that's where you find the work's a grind, but
Mhm.
you decide to double your efforts. It
Yeah,
might make you suffer, but it's for a higher purpose, right? The
sure.
second one, the move around, where you change jobs, believing that your dissatisfaction with the work is
Mhm.
due to your current position. So you might move once or move twice, or keep moving. Another strategy.
Yeah.
The third is the get down. I like, it's kind of like a get down boogie thing, but the get down, it's usually when you've hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
You're disillusioned with work. It all seems to be the same. And here, like you talked about before, it's where you shake off those expectations of others,
Mhm.
and you take the time to do the hard work, to understand the work you genuinely care about. And where do you where do most people find themselves when they're moving towards their own authentic work? Like, and where do they need to go?
Sure. So all those three paths are fantastic paths towards meaning. And if one of them works for someone, then happy is happy, and let's move on. They have a wonder. They'll create meaning in their working lives. There's fantastic research over the past 30 years that shows the majority of the world, 70% of people work for survival. And if they really need to get work to, when we talk about all those human needs, have a secure place to live, get food, healthcare. all those, pay for their, save and pay for their children's education, put some money aside for retirement. Those are all survival needs. And what a lot of people do is when they're in a job that really they're struggling with, whether it's they're not happy there because of, the organization isn't working for them, like we talked about earlier, or they feel there's something missing, meaningfulness in their life, they can normally find a reason to endure and that suffering. And I think it was Carl Jung who said, uh, uh, happy or suffering that hasn't found its meaning. So neuroses, where we're dissatisfied with something, we just haven't found the meaning for that suffering yet. So as soon as we find that meaning for that suffering, Jung would say we feel a little more sane. So if I'm in a job or an organization that I'm really struggling with, but I can say, yeah, but I've got to do it another 10 years or so, because then I'll have the education fund for my kids. It almost gives me another way to keep moving forward. And there's nothing wrong with that. Happy is happy. If that's how somebody gets through the day, years, decades, fantastic. Because obviously there's not a growing angst there. But if that doesn't work, a lot of people move around. They'll go from one job to another. I don't mean every day, every week, but 2 or 3 move arounds, and they say, okay, I finally landed in a career that works for me. Fantastic. Happy is happy. But the get down, what that means is all those other things haven't worked for us. We're already low. And unfortunately, like me and many of my clients, we got to get a little lower before we really are pushed into that crisis that helps us spring forward. Imagine a spring where, we compress that spring enough and then we finally get the big jump from it. That's the getting down. Most people will double down. Fantastic. Happy's happy. Yes, a lot of people move around, but the path of most resistance, but it's the last path left, is the get down, where we just have to find that thing that is meaningful to us, knowing that all work's kind of the same. And when I was listening to your podcast, there was a fantastic guest you had earlier, and the name escapes me, but he talked about helping a lot of people find meaningful work, and how we have to search for that meaning in our lives, that it's not out there, but it's inside of us. So the meaningful work is not really outside. There's no such, you can Google a list of the 10 most meaningful jobs, but if you're not doing one of those jobs, where does that leave you? I'm not on the list. The meaningfulness is inside of us, and it really is something that we need to get connected to. And then once we're connected to the meaning, we can go out in the world and choose one of those jobs to help us move forward on that meaning.
Yeah, like just, I think everyone's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually, I find that the double down situation is interesting because, no one wants to work a monotonous job, but sometimes, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, keeping the job to pay the bills is your reality. You described this concept called responsible work,
Right.
which taps into the idea that we're all wired to be good to, other people,
Mm-hmm.
responsible to one another, and being good feels good, and in a way it can be a bridge to that new work that
Right.
that
And I love that you bring that up, because a lot of people say, well, okay, my authentic work is selling cars at a 50% margin. And that's what I really feel good about. And great, if you can do that, then more power to you. But if you're, selling people bad cars and making their lives miserable, that's probably not, you're probably not going to feel good about that. And there's very few people who would feel good about that. There's, the instance of, we call those the instance of psychopathy, or, knowing the difference between good and bad, but not caring in our society is quite low. Most people are going to feel bad if their job isn't contributing to somebody else's well-being. So it's not enough that you find that thing you love to do. How are you going to be motivated to do the hard work to create that career, to stay with that job, is when you can connect what you do with the good that it does. And when I work with teams and organizations, we do that very thing, because in organizations, and I love how we started talking about organizations today, we often don't get to choose the tasks that we're going to do. We might, co-create our goals, but there's a lot of things we do in the office that, or in the workplace that, really aren't our jam, let's say. But if we can connect how doing those things really help other people, then we can get through doing those things. We can, if I hate doing PowerPoint presentations, but I can see how a good PowerPoint presentation really helps somebody understand ideas and increase their comfort with, change, then I'll try to do my best at that PowerPoint presentation because it's so helpful to somebody else. So it's not a, and it, of course the sweet spot is doing what I love in my job and contributing to well-being. But if I can just do that some of the times in an organization, that might be enough to get us through.
Yeah. When we go through your book, you move through just a number of different stages, like appreciating the meaning of work in your life,
Mhm.
to discovering the work that you truly care about, addressing what's holding you back from feeling good about, the work that you do that we just talked about, contributing to the well-being of others, and then taking the steps every day to create that career that's right for you. And these ideas, they seem simple and clear, but for many people, like moving towards your best work feels
Mhm.
more like a dream than reality.
Mhm.
Like what are the first steps that people can consider when they want to move towards
Yeah,
their
and I think one of the biggest challenges that many of my clients face at this threshold of, yeah, I understand what I want to do, I can see how it could contribute to the well-being of others, but they just have this trouble, moving to the next phase. And it's change. It's that responsibility, knowing that, I'm in control of my future, because that's one thing we really want to make sure people understand, is that you really have a lot of influence, not total control, but a lot of influence on what's going to play out. So there's a few strategies that I ask people to think about. Number one is to imagine the parallel paths. So if somebody says, Tom, I understand what I want to do, I see how it can contribute to well-being, but I'm hesitating taking a first step. Well, I ask people to imagine, whatever whatever environment you're in. Imagine we're in a beautiful meadow, and there's two paths going through the meadow, and they're parallel. So I can walk with one foot on one path and one foot on the other path, and just keep walking forward. That's a perfectly safe thing, and I never have to choose one path or the other until they diverge. And at that point, I can choose to stay on the path I'm on or go to another path. But at the beginning, it's perfectly safe to walk down those two paths. Nothing really changes. So if somebody can understand that there's a safe way to proceed in a slow way, fantastic. The other the other one that I find most helpful is, people imagine that, they need to make decisions every day, and if I'm not making a decision, I'm not moving forward. Well, gathering information is critical too. So I always ask people, information before decision. If you're having a difficulty contacting a certain person, or you don't want to start on a certain education path, or you don't want to quit your job to take this other job that's been presented to you, it's like, well, you probably have a bit of a lack of information. So don't beat yourself up. Let's, what other information do you need to move forward? And the last thing I ask people to do is to remember that, you know, your current situation may be at point A on the scale, and the fantastic job and this life that you want to live in your working life is point Z. But point Z doesn't happen tomorrow. It's point B that happens tomorrow. And there's no, point B is a step forward, but it's not an earth shattering change to your life. So if you can just move to point B, point XYZ will happen in the future, but move to point B.
yeah. Another part of that is, moving from those initial steps to the longer term plan, and it might just
Mhm.
be moving from like A to B. But how about the vision? Like, how about the intentionality of creating a vision? Can you share your thoughts there?
Yeah, so one of the things I also do is I teach part time at a couple of universities in organizational change management, and I try to help people understand the power of a vision. And when we look out into our corporate world, we see a lot of corporations that have strong visions that have guided them forward, and personal visions too. Like if we look at, I always bring up Steve Jobs, late Steve Jobs' vision, and he wanted to put a dent in the universe. Those, the universe is kind of undentable, but just those words inspired him and everyone around him. And, words cause things to happen. So if we can spend some time coming up with our own personal career vision that works for us, then we can then start setting goals. But I have so many clients that want to start with, these are high functioning individuals. They've got a lot of success. Yeah, things aren't working out for them from a meaning perspective now, but it's like, what can I do next, Tom? Give me a goal, or I'm going to set a goal. They can do their goals themselves. And they've achieved their goals in the past, and some of them have been incredibly unfulfilling. So if we can start with a vision of how we want to be in the future, and one that really resonates with us, then let the vision pick the goals. So I remember, after the mortar attack in Yugoslavia so many years ago, first words that, I was thinking about my job, the first words that came to my mind were, the next 10 years will not be like the last 10. And that, I still get goosebumps right now when I say it. And those words were just crystal clear in my mind, and they were true. And then, of course, the same thing happened after the mountaineering accident. I said, the next 10 years will not be like the last 10. Those, we can, Tom, what did you mean by that? And it's like, I really don't understand it. But those words just propelled me forward. And some of the visions that my clients create, spend some time working on and create, have, again, been that spring that just launches them.
That's great. Tom, I've really enjoyed our conversation. To end, I'd just like to ask, what are some of the key messages organizational leaders can take from your best work philosophy?
Well, I think what's important is to realize that as an organizational leader, you have a lot of influence over one of the constructs, one of the things that people are in this world, how they participate in work. So if you're a leader of an organization, that organization is one of not too many ways that humans get to participate in work. So how you manage that organization, how you communicate, all the things you do have a huge impact on the well-being of others. And I think leaders know that. But when you realize that all these people that are engaging in your organization are searching, some of them, work is incredibly important to them in their lives, and they're really looking for, how can the work be meaningful? But that's when I ask organization leaders to stop, and I say, what they're asking is, they're asking how it can be meaningful to them. So everybody engages in the organization in a different way. For some people, it might be, I really don't want too much professional development. I really don't like change, but I really just, need to make sure I get that paycheck to pay for that kid's education. That's scary for many organizational leaders, because they say, well, hold on, am I just a paycheck to them? It's like, well, for some people, you might just be a paycheck, but let's understand what that person needs, and let's hopefully move them into a job and a place in the organization where that works for them. Someone else, though, might say, I am an innovator. I love change. I need to constantly move forward, and I am so passionate about my job. Let's identify the meaning that they need, and let's try to help them find a spot in that organization that works for them. So massive organizations, a lot of work. It has to be approached at, at various levels, and there's only so much we can do. Small organization, of course, there's tons you can do. But what I ask people to understand in organizations is, you've got a bunch of these individual meaning takers that are looking for very specific meaning for them. And the more we can get in touch with that, or the more we can create space for that, the more we're going to create what I call as a thriving organization. People doing what they need for the organization, because the organization is doing what they need.
Yeah, that's great. Tom, thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had a great time, and all the best.
Thank you for your support. Please remember to click subscribe so we can bring you more remarkable interviews with extraordinary leaders.